In the early 1960s, Leonard Wasden, a prominent businessman in Idaho Falls, owned a 600-acre dry farm approximately 20 miles west of town. There, on a gentle slope rising over arid lands stretching west to snow-capped mountains, are three exposed caves. They are large, ancient lava tube openings that filled up with sediment over thousands of years. When Wasden would visit his land, he would often take his three grandsons with him.
We would spend several Saturdays with him, especially during the summer, and on occasion he would stop by what we knew as the caves, and we could go down and play and explore into these caves. We had no idea that there were ancient mammoths and ancient bison, or even the sense of the human population that existed there for tens of thousands of years.
In 1964, Leonard Wasden was approached by a group of passionate amateur archaeologists called the Upper Snake River Prehistoric Society, asking permission to explore the site in hopes of uncovering ancient artifacts. Mr. Wasden gave permission, laying out the terms and conditions in a written and signed contract.
I don't think the surrounding area within the surface area has ever been surveyed other than just a visual survey, even though it's been farmed or tilled.
Right.
Operating under the guidance of B. Robert Butler of Idaho State University, the Society began a methodical excavation in 1965, laying out grids and moving the earth weekend after weekend during the summer and sorting and documenting their finds in the winter.
I was here when they turned the first scoop of dirt and decided where we'd put the grid and how deep we were going to go, how big the grids were. Just every weekend, whoever of us was available came out here and we moved dirt.
The group worked at the site for 6 years. However, their downward progress was slowed to a crawl when they uncovered a thick layer of basalt boulders that had fallen from the cave over 10,000 years ago. Then, in 1974, excavations resumed under the direction of Earl Swanson and Suzanne Miller, a doctoral student from Idaho State University. Supported by a grant from the National Science Foundation, the team undertook the physically demanding phase of removing the massive piles of rock. Successfully breaking through, they were again able to dig downward to the deepest layers of sediment. Among the dramatic discoveries at Owl Cave was a layer of thousands of bison bones and the stone tools used to process their meat, evidence pointing to this site being used as a hunting ground. The ancient people used a sophisticated bison drive technique.
They're usually accompanied by features on the landscape which were used, piles of rocks and brush, a very obvious lane to an area where they might have encountered or actually knew where the bison were gathered, and begin to drive them. And they would cascade off of a lip of a cliff or something that the animals couldn't see, or when they were panicked, they just went. And so they would set up some type of margins and they would pile rocks. If you put brush on top of it or limbs or branches or something, and then you had people hiding behind them, getting ready to yell and flap hides and do that kind of thing, it would panic the bison, and you could get a lot of them to follow a leader through there.
The herd would run fast in a panic, fall en masse off the top of the cave opening downward where the native people dispatched them. Researchers are still working to confirm that this may be the oldest bison jump site in North America, dating back as far as 9,000 years ago. As digging continued down to the cave floor, bones of a Columbian mammoth were uncovered, along with the bones of extinct bison, camel, and dire wolf. Folsom points, among the most distinctive and beautiful projectile points in all of prehistoric North America, were found mixed with the bones. Owl Cave became an archaeological treasure trove, producing more than 80,000 artifacts, until the money and manpower ran out in 1977.
Archaeological sites that are connected to the first peopling of North America, they're very, very rare. Very rarely encountered, and They are the only source of information that we have to understand anything about these people. We haven't put the picture together. And it doesn't matter who the researcher is, we're all struggling with the same questions. So when you find a site that dates to 13,000 years ago, and you have, again, those stratified deposits, so you have a complete archaeological record that goes all the way up to about 150 years ago. Again, incredibly rare, incredibly rare. So there is essentially a complete record in that cave.
The continuity of the archaeological record at Owl Cave presents a unique situation. It is one of only a handful of deeply stratified sites in the western United States. For many years, the artifacts recovered from the excavations were on loan and stored at the Idaho Museum of Natural History, as per the original agreement between Wasden, ISU, and the Upper Snake River Prehistoric Society. However, Wasden had the wisdom to retain ownership, ensuring that the collection would always be available for scientific research.
As my career progressed, the one thing that I noticed in the literature is that the Wasden site was disappearing. It was just not being mentioned by archaeological researchers. And I just thought that was an incredible shame. This is an amazing site. And yes, it was underpublished. And there was never really a final report that was prepared for people to go to and cite. So yeah, after I got my PhD, I just decided in 2006 that I was just going to put forth a very concerted effort to try to get the Wasden site back in the publications, back into the forefront of really, really terminal Pleistocene, early peopling of America's research, because it's that important.
In 2013, Suzanne arranged for the 10-acre Wasden site, by then owned by the Croft family, to be acquired by the Archaeological Conservancy. This was the best way to protect the site from neglect, unprofessional use, or illegal access. The site was formally designated as the Croft Archaeological Preserve, a first for the state of Idaho. Suzanne was appointed site steward and worked on preservation and enhanced security. The Croft site, with the 3 Wasden caves, are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and a National Historic Landmark nomination is currently in progress.
I had reinitiated research on the cave in 2006. And it had been a struggle, just working with the Idaho Museum of Natural History. And I remember the morning that Randy called and just introduced himself. And I thought, yeah, this is fantastic. This is an incredible opportunity for a partnership. And we could get a great deal done.
That was in 2016. Randy and Steve Harris, grandsons of Leonard Wasden, thereafter began their efforts to intervene on behalf of the artifacts. They proved the ownership of the artifacts remained with the descendants of the Wasden family. Randy and Steve formed the Wasden Archaeological Association to represent the Wasden heirs and act as legal stewards over the artifacts. They then searched for a professional institution to catalog and store the collection and manage future research. Their path led them to the Museum of Idaho, located just 20 miles from the cave's site. Formal discussions ensued and commitments followed.
So we drew up the necessary paperwork and gave ownership of the artifacts to the Museum of Idaho, which is the right thing to do. And they took on the responsibility with appropriate guidelines and conditions that they agreed to meet as the new owners, with oversight from the Wasden Archaeological Association.
Today, the entire collection is curated at the Museum of Idaho. Several of these fascinating treasures are on public display at the Museum of Idaho. Continued research, spearheaded by archaeologist Suzanne Henriksen, scientific advisor for the Wasden Archaeological Association, is adding new dimensions to our understanding of the last ice age in southeastern Idaho.
West of the Rocky Mountains, There have been no archaeological sites found thus far that link humans with extinct megafauna. If we know that it was bison antiquus that was killed by those Folsom hunters, a lot of my archaeological colleagues joke that it's a mic drop, boom, done, very, very significant.
As of 2025, new radiocarbon dates from the bison antiquus remains recovered from the bottom of Owl Cave indeed indicate that they are likely associated with the Folsom points from the same depths, making the site the only known Folsom bison kill west of the Rocky Mountains. Since acquisition by the Museum of Idaho, research on the Owl Cave collection is in full swing. The most recent efforts have focused on the identification of other Ice Age mammals recovered from the cave, including a variety of large carnivores. Bones from the deepest levels are also being examined for evidence of human butchering. With the help of partnerships, these newly identified mammals will undergo DNA analysis to help understand the timing of Ice Age extinctions in Idaho and beyond. Analysis of the thousands of bones and stone tools from the 9,000-year-old bison kill is also underway to understand how and why people chose Owl Cave as the optimal spot for a bison drive. The Wasden Archaeological Association, a nonprofit organization, currently partners with the Archaeological Conservancy and the Museum of Idaho to protect the site, support ongoing research, and connect the public to this remarkable piece of Idaho's human story.
Isn't it amazing that Granddad Wasden had the foresight to establish some criteria that actually, so many years later, still is important? Because my grandpa wanted to make sure that the artifacts were taken care of properly and that they were presented for the public education and that they were also available for professional research. And that legacy that he established back in the mid-1960s is as important today as it was then and will continue to be as important in the decades to come.
Half of Owl Cave remains unexcavated. The two other caves remain untouched, sealed time capsules still waiting for the right moment to be opened. There are many questions, and these professionals are working to answer them.
So I suspect that, as we get more and more of the information published, that we will get researchers who are specifically interested in going back to the site. Obviously, we have a tremendous amount of intact deposits there, and half of Owl Cave is unexcavated. So the questions that can be addressed, not just the existing ones, but also future questions. These caves need to be basically public outreach projects, public education. And I think the research community would be very excited to have that happen. It's great to know that the Wasden Archaeological Association wants to do it the right way. So does the Museum of Idaho.
This is a continuing story, 13,000 years in the making, a legacy that belongs to all of us. Stabilization, preservation, and proper stewardship are key. Future researchers will return to these lava tubes with many questions, using new tools and new possibilities. The story is far from over.